Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Inside Indie. Today we have a very special episode. Today we have BenStar, the lead developer of Revita, which is coming out into 1.0 in just a few days' time. I think it'll actually be out at the time of this being posted, or at least it will be very near. And of course, I'm joined by BD1P, my co-host, as always. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about Revita a lot. Hey, guys.
A lot of Revita. How's it going?
Yeah, I gotta say, so we've only just got to know Ben really, but he has been working on Revita for quite a long while now. How long has it been actually?
It has been probably roughly 5 to 6 years, actually.
That long, really?
Kind of. You could the game kind of went through a lot of iterations. So the first iteration of the project was not anything like what it is right now. So because of that, it took quite a long time.
So what was that then?
So when the project first started, it was called Aerodynamic.
Okay.
And the idea was very similar. So the idea was to create a platformer roguelike. At the time, there were none. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon. Now I'm a little bit too late to the party, but you know, it's the thought that counts.
Well, the 5 years definitely paid off because you've made something very special. It looks like.
Thanks.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, so you played as like a kid, similar to the Revita kid now. But you had like a bow and arrow instead, and you could like slow down time, and the whole game was basically resolved around the idea of like you have to aim your arrows carefully, you have to take gravity into account, and then you have to kind of like pull the arrows back, like similar to like Titan Souls. If that tells you anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like similar structure. You went from room to room. You defeated all the enemies. Then you move on to the next room. There's like item rooms and stuff in between. That kind of stuff.
So when was it that pivoted to what it is now then?
Probably 4 years ago.
Okay. So you only did like about a year of development on that.
Yeah, and then I went through like a lot of different iterations, just trying out stuff.
Is
like
that where the Celestial Bow came from as well?
There was probably some inspiration that was like, I'm gonna put the aerodynamic back into this game.
Yeah.
Well, in case our audience is not fully aware, do you want to just explain what Revita is, I guess, in general terms? Because they might be like, what the hell is this game they're talking about right now?
Sure. So Revita is a 2D platformer roguelite in which you control a small kid called Revita Kid, and you climb a tower in search for your lost memories. And the whole big gimmick of the game is that your health is your currency, meaning every choice you make, upgrades, all kinds of stuff, has like very long-lasting consequences, as you have to balance your health and your damage output and that kind of stuff.
And I have to say, I'm a person that is a huge advocate for risk-reward in roguelike. I actually think it's one of the most important things because it is the thing that appeals most to long-term players of a game. I feel like if a roguelike doesn't have risk-reward, it's very hard to have a lot of longevity past completing the game. And Revita obviously does that perfectly. That being one of the core mechanics means it's a very, very thought-out system. And prior to this, I'd say that Undermine had been my favourite risk-reward, and I definitely think Revita has topped that, because I love rolling the bones and like risking all your health to try and get more power. It's always so fun.
It leads to loss a lot, but you know what? That's what we're here for, is just losing to the final boss because you give up all your HP to upgrade a useless relic.
Yeah.
That's the spirit.
But yeah, like as Ben said, with the idea of trading HP, it's not just right, if you want to upgrade your item, you can lose some HP. No, if you want an item, you have to lose some HP. Like if you want to do basically anything, you're gonna need to trade your HP.
If you want to buy a goddamn key, you need HP. Like it's everything in the game. It really is one of, I think, the most fun risk rewards because it's just a direct correlation between your defense and your offense.
Yeah, it's so
a lot
simple,
of games, there's kind of like a middleman in there where it's like, well, you can give up X or Y, but you can get it back later. You can get this to augment that. Like, for example, you could take Isaac and its Devil Deals. You pay for an item like that, but you can find soul hearts in plethoras and black hearts, and you can bomb up in secret rooms to get extra HP. But in this game, it's much more of a direct, like, you are going to lose this HP for quite a long time. And I think it works to the game's benefit quite well.
Yeah, because it's like with Isaac, you trade away your heart containers, and as you said, you've got soul hearts and other health to get, and most of the time it doesn't matter all that much unless you're on really low health. But the only thing that taking a devil deal does, really, if you're a good player, is stops you from taking more devil deals. Whereas in this game, if you spend your health to buy a key or an item, that means that you can't buy the next item or next key. And that means you can't do these other things. Considering there's so many things that cost HP, you're not just purchasing that thing. You're purchasing that thing and what it stops you from purchasing later, which I think really adds to that snowball effect, as you were saying. It's got really big ramifications for later on your run.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can be very punishing, but also, I mean, the reward as well for, like, if you find a really good relic or a really good synergy, the reward of just knowing you have the HP to trade away. I'm going to be at 1 heart for a while, but I can get that back if my build is strong enough. I mean, it's a gambler's dream in there.
Yeah.
And as someone who gambles way too much in video games, it's very unhealthy for me. But you've made a good mechanic at that.
I've always said that I will never step foot inside a casino because I will go bankrupt. I will.
Oh, no.
I will spend all of my money because based on how I play games,
gamble your entire channel away just for an extra shot at the slots, huh?
Pretty much. But yeah, I think on top of that, when I had a point in my mind, but now I'm just going to try and find it again. With the trading HP, sort of getting later on into the game, I feel like it's a really, really good way of helping a new player to understand and get better, because it's like, as you get better, you feel you can take these risks more, which means you kind of understand them, you get to mess around with them more, and it's a really, really nice difficulty curve, because you're going to have a hard time if you don't risk your HP, but once you get good enough to risk your HP, you're going to have a harder time. It really smooths out very nicely with the difficulty curve, which not a lot of games do, I don't think.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to talk about was, you mentioned that you wanted to be one of the first, like, platformer roguelikes out there, but you had to have some kind of, like, influence somewhere, right? Because the way the platformer works, it's not just like you run and jump. It's you run, you jump, you dash. You can use fast falls. You can use rocket launches pretty much with like TF2 soldier style. I mean, were these all ideas that you kind of had, or did you find inspiration from other titles that you had played previously?
There certainly is a lot of inspiration on the moveset from other games. I think that the dash has like a lot of inspiration from Celeste.
I definitely feel that.
Yeah, there's like a ledge grab when you just barely make it to a ledge. That's like very much inspired by how Dead Cells does that. The gun jump is actually just a bug that became a feature.
That's cool.
That was originally not supposed to be here, but it was way too much fun, so
I didn't know that existed for a little while. Now that I've sort of learned about it, it's super nice. Essentially what he's talking about, by the way, is if you shoot down, you just get a little boost to your height when you jump, so you can use it to kind of chain jumps to get up to higher ledges, which I feel like, I don't know if it's done on purpose, but a lot of the levels seem to be designed where the ledge is just too low to get to it without a gun jump. I don't know if that's on purpose, or a wall jump, yeah. But I feel like that really adds to the levels, because like each room is pretty basic, pretty simple in terms of the design. There is later on you do get some more bigger and complex ones, but even still, like I feel like you want to be moving around constantly. You want to be using all the ledges. There's a lot of enemies, especially in the early areas of the game, that require you to be up high to not get hit, or at least you're a lot safer. So I feel like mastering those wall jumps, those gun jumps, is a huge part of this game, as well as just getting good at managing your HP.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I was in the start of the game, where the hub world is, like next to the train and all that, I spent like an hour trying to jump on top of like the area, because there's got to be a secret up here or something, and I didn't know you could actually gun jump at that point. And I was just messing around with like, how can I get extra height to make it up here? And then I accidentally gun jumped, and I was like, oh my god, it's an actual feature in the game that you can do like rocket boost. It doesn't even hurt you either. It's just like, it's the best of both worlds there. But it's very rare that I find myself in a roguelike especially, wanting to traverse my hub world and explore like every like nook and cranny of that. It's almost very Shovel Knight-esque in that regard, where you're walking around, you're talking to different like townsfolk, and you can like do different things there and get different upgrades and things like that. It's just a very like robust game from start to finish. It feels like.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think so as well. The sort of hub area, I feel like it's got some like familiar parts from other games, but it's also got a lot of uniqueness. How exactly did you decide on how you put together that hub area and how the meta progression unlocks would work? Where did that come from?
That's a very good question. So the hub area, its design kind of just came together by the base idea of you go to each area via a metro, which that idea was there first, and then from there it made sense to then make the hub area a metro station. Originally, that wasn't actually supposed to be a hub area. At first, the idea was kind of like to just keep it as like a menu, but then a hub area just feels more like a full experience, if that makes sense. Like it gives the player a place to like go back to relax. There's like a lot of like small fun interactions just to have something to do between runs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like on top of that as well. So in case people didn't know, this game has a lot of cosmetics. And no, they're not microtransactions. It has a lot of cosmetics you can unlock through various different ways, and one of the things that you can do is basically completely pimp out your hub area. Once you've unlocked all the other things that affect gameplay, you can start spending your currency, and I feel like that's a huge driving force to keep playing the game past the point of unlocking everything. And adding a hub area, yeah, it's really good for that. But I'm also sort of mean like in terms of like the two different side areas. So you have the one with the tree. There's the hub area with the tree, and there's a few NPCs that side. But there's also the guy with like different guns. How exactly did you decide on that way of progression?
So a lot of the progression kind of just came to be as the game moved through early access. Like originally, there was never meant to be multiple guns. But then a lot of people were like, well, it kind of like, I don't really like the starting gun. I would like there to be like more starting variety. Like when you start a run, there should be more variety there. And I was like, well, actually, that's a fair point. It should probably have something like that. So that's how the guns came to be.
I feel like it's the way that you did weaponry is quite unique, because for those of you that don't know, with this game, you have your starting pistol, but then there's also, I believe, 6 other weapons you can select from, that all have very different playstyles from the first one. All have different stats. There's like an SMG, a rocket launcher, a shotgun, a laser gun, and they also have like reasons to use each one of them. Even if it's a gun you don't typically like, sometimes it'll be like, you get extra meta currency if you use this one. And I feel like it's a really good system, but most games either have you start with a specific weapon and not be able to change it, or have you change your weapon within the run. So it's kind of an interesting idea to be able to change out between weapons before you even start the run.
Yeah, it's like the idea was kind of like, well, structurally, the game is very similar to Isaac in regards to its item system. So a lot of the run variety comes from the items that you find as you keep building your build per run. But yeah, then to have something that like basically puts you in like different starting paths, I think is quite neat, which basically the guns serve that purpose. Like every gun, as you said, has like a different purpose. They have different upsides and downsides, which then put you like in different positions in regards to certain builds. Like for example, one of the items is Moon Earring, which makes it so your bullets orbit around you, which is like, for example, really good with the machine gun, but is really terrible with the rocket launcher.
Yeah.
And so depending on which gun you play with, other builds might be more beneficial, while others might be not as great.
Yeah, and so as I said as well when we started this podcast, the 1.0 update, which is like the coming out of early access update, is coming in just a few days, and I think it should be out as of the day of release. I'm going to try release this podcast on the day the update comes out, is what I'm saying. But I've decided that now. But with that, I've also heard there's going to be a lot more synergies, so there's going to be even more reason to diversify what weapons you're using. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, there's not so the game has like item synergies, which are like just natural combinations of items, but then the game also has like a mechanical synergies on top of that.
I normally call those soft synergies. If they're not like a hard-coded synergy, it's like a soft synergy.
Yeah, it's like kind of like an armor set of some sort, where it's like if you get like certain items, then you get like a benefit out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so not just are there like 70 plus new relics, which is
that's a lot. That's a lot.
yeah, that's a lot, which puts us above. I'm pretty sure we're very much above the original Rebirth item amount.
I gotta say, I've always sort of thought with a good, like for me, I've always thought like a good item number for a roguelike is like 300, and I'm guessing this is tipping you over that amount.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
That's gonna be a lot, is what you're saying in 1.0.
Yeah, that's a whole lot.
Actually, let's just take a step back from our discussion and just how about you tell us how big 1.0 is gonna be?
So 1.0 is probably, and I don't want to overestimate, but it's probably roughly the size of all of the early access updates combined, or most of them at the very least combined, which, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Big.
So
You've almost doubled the size of your game, huh?
In a sense, yes.
That's wild. I mean, you mentioned earlier too, like you wanted to help push players out of their comfort zones. Before we started recording, we were talking. How does 1.0 like seek to help push players to use different relics and to use different mechanics and to try different things? How is there like what kind of game elements are there that help push the player towards that goal?
So for one, there are more guns.
Ooh,
so there's
guns.
yes, so there's like.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to
say.
say too much in regards to that. I've seen some people already saw it today in some of the embargo footage.
Right.
There's a little bit more to it than just, like 1-2 more guns.
Mm-hmm.
There's some secret stuff to it. But apart from that, obviously there's like a lot of new relics. There's a lot of new synergies. There's just a lot more stuff to do. And that just allows for like a bajillion new different builds and stuff like that.
So yeah,
Right.
I'm guessing you think with the introduction of new stuff, that in itself is just going to push people out of their comfort zone. Because if they get a relic they normally wouldn't play with, then they're going to have to change it. Especially when it's new and you don't know what it does, you're always going to pick it up.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I really like the ability of like being able to start with stuff that you unlock as well. By the way, that is amazing. I think Undermine also did that, but yeah, the fact that if you get the meta currency, you can unlock and take one of those items with you for your first run. It's a really cool thing because when you unlock a new thing, you're like, oh, this is so cool. It's like, but now I've just got to wait until I find it. Like, I like just in Isaac, for example, you're like, finally, I've done Jacob as an Ezau boss rush. I've unlocked Rock Bottom, and then you don't see it for 6 months.
Right. Yeah, the idea is also kind of like additionally, the idea is basically to not just be like, hey, you get to experiment around with this item that you just unlocked, but also an issue, especially with this kind of game, where like the trade-offs are always fairly big and fairly impactful.
Mm-hmm.
If you just look at the description of an item, you might just go like, well, this doesn't sound very good. But then with the unlock system, you're guaranteed to get to experiment around with that item.
That is
so you know whether it's good
love.
or not.
I love that, yeah. The fact that it doesn't tell you what it does until you have it in your inventory is a very, very nice idea. Yeah, I think I think new weapons is gonna be huge as well, because so far I kind of cycle between 3 or 4 weapons really. There's a few that I just don't tend to use that much, so having even more options there is gonna be quite nice.
Yeah, absolutely. There's
I've
gonna be a lot.
Well, you go on. I personally have like really tried my best to use the shotgun. I'm a shotgun fan, like getting close range and doing like big bursts of damage. But I've also noticed in a lot of cases that I miss the extra range. I need that range for bosses like the final boss, Depression, and stuff like that. And it just comes to a point where I'm like, man, the shotgun may be fun to use and it may be good early game, but I have to really kind of strategize my upgrade systems and my relics to make sure I have enough range for the final boss. Or I can go back, I can use the starting gun, I can try and use like the machine gun. I think it's really cool how the bosses, while they are mostly stagnant for where they are in the game, they tend to play around different forms of offense and defense. Like, it's very easy to go super hard on the first couple of bosses, but by the end, having defense is definitely more important to stand by and dodge these heavy-hitting attacks.
Right.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this. We had like about an hour prior to starting the podcast where we were just kind of talking. I was playing some runs and streaming them, and we were kind of talking about that, how each boss challenges the player in a different way. The first 2 floor bosses are kind of pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory, but by the time you get to the 3rd floor boss, you're starting to do things that you wouldn't normally do and change how you play it. And once you get to the 4th boss, which is Depression, you kind of have depression because that boss is tough. That boss really, really throws a spanner into the works and completely changes how you have to play the game. If you're someone that doesn't dodge that often, which to be honest, in the game, at least early on, isn't required. A lot of the time, you can jump out of the way of things. You don't have to dodge. Once you get to that boss, if you aren't dodging, you're dying.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think in that way, the bosses are really well designed.
Thank you.
But the game is obviously themed. That's the 5 stages of grief and things like that. And you're going to reclaim your memories from the top of this tower sort of thing. How much of the focus do you think, in terms of you writing out the game and planning out the game, was put onto the lore or the kind of the world building of it? Or do you find that the lore of a game is not as important as, let's say, like the gameplay or the actual fun value of it? Well, where would you rate the lore versus the fun value, I guess?
So I am personally definitely someone who values gameplay over pretty much everything else.
I like to hear it.
So I go into game development with a gameplay and artistic vision first, and then story stuff comes later.
Right.
But I am a very big fan of world building. So while Revita doesn't have like a ton of like spoken dialogue and stuff like that, there's like hidden details basically everywhere. Like the world as it's built makes in itself sense and that kind of stuff. And we spend a lot of hours, like me and the writer on the game, coming up with like a lot of like cool background details and that kind of stuff to really flesh out the world and the story that the game in the end ends up telling.
It's very interesting. I kind of like the more subtle storytelling that a game has, as opposed to a game that's more like 20 lines of dialogue per NPC to tell you what happened in the history of it. Cough, cough, Pokemon Arceus. Like, there's just so much that I think can be told by just walking around in the world. Like, even the hub world, again, here in Revita, it's not the most like expansive or huge thing in the world, but you can walk around that and find details, and you can go out, there's a new fishing mini game apparently you can do on the docks and things like that, which you're very excited for. But it's very fun just to walk around this small, cutesy kind of environment, but know that there are more, I guess, evil things lurking below, or I guess wherever the train takes you. But it's very nice to see, because a lot of roguelikes focus on the gameplay more, I feel like, because a goal of a roguelike, correct me if I'm wrong here because I'm not a game developer, but it's to be replayable for hours and hours. And if you only have story, you can only hear a story so many times before you fall asleep.
In fact, I feel like a good story can sometimes hinder a roguelike's ability to be replayed. Because it's like Hades. Hades is brilliant. I love Hades. But goddamn, once you've played it, like beat it and played it enough times, I want to get rid of all the story and just play the game. Like, I don't, because it's beautifully crafted and just an amazing story, and like all the dialogue is amazing. But you do get very tired of hearing it, even when it's just selecting boons in that game. For those of you that don't know, when you select like an upgrade, a god will come and speak to you, and they'll have a dialogue. You can skip through the dialogue, but they'll speak to you, and you've got to select it. But even that, it's like it's a lot once you've already beaten the game so many times.
Isn't that so weird though? Like, where even the smallest amount of like a pause just makes you so mad, because I'm the same way. Like if I can't skip like Star Wars opening crawl and Lego Star Wars, it's like I get so mad. I'm like, let me skip this, please, God. I want to play the game.
I feel like especially in roguelikes, you just get into a gameplay flow and you're like, yeah, this is going really well. I'm getting upgrades. I'm killing things, and it's like, stop. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am glad that this is more subtle storytelling. I'd actually I was kind of thinking as BD1P was talking there. I think I'd compare it similarly to how Hollow Knight does its storytelling, which I think is just a wonderfully crafted story. It doesn't push it in your face. It just gives you these little hints and uses the background to tell the story, and it works really, really well.
Yeah, I'm glad the inspiration shines through. That was definitely a big inspiration in that regard.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think I think you did a really good job, because it's I feel like as well, it's one of those things where, same with Hollow Knight, you don't need to know the story to know the story. You don't need to know the deep lore to understand what's happening.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, talking about the inspiration in general for Revita and other games that you've either played or are in the process of making or have made and stuff like that, what was your gaming background like? What did you grow up playing? What was your favorite game? I guess what is your favorite game as well? Just fun little questions to ask you.
That's a good question. That's a really difficult question to answer. But to answer the first question, so I grew up on a lot of Nintendo games. I'm a Nintendo kid. That's where a lot of my design philosophy kind of stuff comes from. But I'm also a very avid roguelike player. I started playing Isaac when I was pretty much when it came out, I think, the Flash version.
It's been a while then.
Yeah. And I got hooked on that, and then when Rebirth came out, I didn't stop playing. And so that kind of developed my love in roguelike games, kind of more arcade-esque inspired games that you play more in short bursts that put a heavy emphasis on a replayability, that kind of stuff. And that's kind of the background of games in regards to me. But in regards to my favorite game, it's if I had to settle for one game, it'd probably be Hollow Knight. Otherwise, it's a good mix of Hollow Knight, Super Mario Sunshine, funnily enough, and Fez. I think those are my biggest kind of
those are
gaming inspirations.
Very unique picks.
Yeah.
I gotta say,
Hollow Knight's definitely one of my
Hollow
favorite.
Knight.
You haven't? Oh my lord!
I just.
How dare you?
It is one of the best games of all time, and we're sitting with the Revita dev, another one of the best games of all time.
Jesus.
Yeah, no, I haven't touched Hollow Knight. I've been told to over and over. It's just I haven't found the time to sit down.
I got forced to through YouTube. I ended up doing a series on it.
Turtle, if you play a Kirby game, I'll play Hollow Knight. That's the deal here.
Once I get a Switch, I'll get the newest one, and then
there you go. There you go. Perfect.
I think
he needs to play Hollow Knight.
Yeah, I own Hollow Knight on 3 different things as well.
It's insane. I only bought a game twice. I think I bought Isaac twice, and that was the most I've bought a game. But
I bought
it's cool to hear that you're
4 times.
Oh, I guess I bought Skyrim a lot too. Yeah, Switch, PC, special edition, all that stuff. But it's cool to hear that you're a Nintendo kid, because that's what I grew up on as well. I know I'm gonna sound like I'm a baby, but my first console was the Wii, and
really.
Yeah. And you're a bit older than I am, Turtle. So you're gonna be
I know.
What
I do always forget. I do always
is.
forget that you're a lot younger than I am. It's weird.
Yeah, and you're 22, right?
I'm 24. Oh wait, no.
24. Wait.
Ben, how old are you?
I am 22.
Okay, you're 22.
I'm turning 23.
I'm 24, and you're still 19, right?
I'm still 19. Yeah, it's fresh out of the oven, I guess. But no, it's cool to hear that. It's just very weird to me because I grew up playing Nintendo games as well, mostly Lego games and other kind of third-party licensed stuff. But I do get kind of that Nintendo charm almost from a lot of the things in Revita, and just in terms of how it's, I don't want to say the polish of the game, but the way the characters kind of interact and the way they're placed, especially the guy on the train who upgrades your stuff, it reminds me of a Goron from Legend of Zelda. I mean, the things, it definitely has that charm, I think, for sure. And I get, and it's going to be on the Switch as well, if you don't know, in the audience, so it all comes full circle, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's some very clear inspiration in some places, some not so clear as in others. I mean, a lot of the enemy design, philosophy very much comes from Kirby games, where it's well, every enemy needs to have, one big eyeball. So yeah, there's a lot of probably fairly clear inspirations just because of those other kind of games they grew up with.
Yeah, you go with
they're good games, so it's not a bad thing at all.
No, absolutely not.
You go with the Edmund Macmillan aspect of enemy design, where it's like, I want to kill something only if it has a face.
Yeah.
I like the big eye thing though. I mean,
works,
it's just
yeah.
it's been a staple. But no, it's I mean, I really can't praise the game enough. I haven't made any content on it. I'm waiting for 1.0, but I cannot recommend Revita enough to people who are, because if you're watching this podcast, you're a fan of Isaac, you're a fan of, I'm guessing, Hollow Knight as well. If you're not a fan of me, obviously, but you should pick up the game. I mean, it's 25, or how much is it again? Revita?
Oh no, it's way cheaper. It's so if this comes out when the game releases into 1.0, it's gonna be on sale for 20%, which puts it on, I think, like $15.
Holy!
So it's
They have no excuse to not play the game then.
Yeah, and if you like games like Isaac, etc., you're gonna feel very much at home.
I tell you what, I'm doing it here and now. If anyone in the comments of this video wants a Revita, first person to message me, I'll buy you a copy.
Oh dang!
Oh my god. I will not be doing that because taxes ate me this year, but in spirit, I would.
First person to DM me asking for a copy, which I'm going to get a lot of DMs, but first person to DM me on Discord asking for a copy, I will buy you a copy of Revita.
Heck yeah.
It truly is a special game.
Like, I actually have an interesting, I won't say relationship with the game, but I didn't play it for a long while. I mainly watched Olexa play it a little while ago, and I hadn't really seen much about it since in terms of the updates. But I was still interested, and I bought it sort of on a whim when it was on sale a few months back, and I just never got around to playing it when it came out. I can't remember what came out at the time, but something big came out and kind of got me distracted. And anyway, so I got COVID, like, 3-4 weeks ago, and I was basically relegated to the sofa. I had to like quarantine because my girlfriend had to use the rest of the house, and I was already in the sofa when I found out I had it. So I got my Steam Link, I hooked up, and I played Revita and nothing else, non-stop for an entire week. I got about 20 something hours in it. I'm on 25 hours played now, so maybe just under 20. And yeah, I just played it, and it was like, I think it was kind of what BD1P was saying earlier about it feeling like the older Nintendo games. It felt like such a great couch experience. It really did. And yeah, it was really fun to just have a single game to binge while I was ill.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I'm gonna tell you what big game came out around that time. I think at the end of that month, Repentance came out. So we'll just see. That's probably what it was.
That'll be the one.
But I wanted to also ask you, we had an episode recently of our podcast where we were talking about the importance of like gaming journalism versus more like YouTube exposure. I don't know if you saw that conversation at all, but
probably
we were talking about how, and we are not game devs, just so everyone knows. We're pretty much just dumb idiots talking about things we don't know anything about, so take it with a grain of salt. We were kind of mentioning how the age of IGN and Polygon is kind of falling short because it's much more profitable, at least in our eyes, to give a game copy to a YouTuber and have them play it to expose the audience. What's your take on, I guess, would you rather give Revita, if you only could give out one copy, to IGN, or would you rather give it to somebody like Olexa?
The thing is, and I think the question, the very important question that comes up with that is, what type of game is it? Because Revita is a roguelite, and those games basically live or die with people streaming it, creating content on them, etc. So in that context, yes, probably content creators are much more vital to a game's success or to just stay alive than more traditional journalism. But if you have, for example, like a very much like a story-based game or something like that, then I would argue that probably like a more journalistic website, IGN, etc., are going to be more beneficial in the long run, simply because if you watch someone play like a very story-heavy game, you're most likely not going to buy the game afterwards because you know the story, and if that's the big focus of it, then, you know. But overall, I would say that both probably have their kind of like upsides and downsides, or they just have different upsides.
I'd say
Yeah.
like
I don't want to make you diss any like journalists you have given the game to, obviously.
No,
but-
absolutely not. I mean, that's definitely not the intention in any way. My point is more so that for content creators, it's more like personal, I guess. It's like you get like a more personal opinion, while from journalists you get like a more quote unquote critical opinion on games, which for certain games, like I look more towards one of the groups. For other games, I might look more towards the other group. You know,
For sure.
I feel like it's a difficult thing with roguelikes as well, especially one like Revita that has so much content for the late game. Because I mean, with the sort of like health trading mechanics, this game was clearly designed to be played for a long time and have a lot of late game content. I feel like reviewers never get to that, which is a problem.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, and it's even noticeable, and because like for context, when this is being recorded, the embargo just lifted on reviews, and they even on those reviews you can see like even like obviously there's a lot of heart put into them, but you can see that a lot of people like might have not made it that far into the game, which makes sense and is fair because like roguelikes
you're not going to
big
spend
time
16 hours writing
Yes,
a review.
absolutely. Yeah. Some people only have like 5-10 hours. It's most likely even less, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that is definitely with roguelites. That kind of definitely is an issue.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we were talking about one of our main points was that I have never like gone onto IGN to look for a new game releasing. I've always found that the game's releasing through a YouTuber or through like a sponsorship. And when it comes to a site like IGN, I guess if you're gonna take Twitch versus IGN, right? When you're looking for let's say a new roguelike to play, and you look up roguelike on IGN, you're gonna find quite a lot of results for things that you want to look at and read through. But you can look up on Twitch roguelike and just see like videos of people playing the game live and seeing what it's actually like. I think it's much more impactful in that regard. Now that being said, like I almost feel like gaming journalism is being kept alive by reviewers making mistakes or reviewers not understanding a game. Like we had the whole Cuphead thing a few years ago, which was taken out of context because the reviewers said he's just bad at games. It's not the game's fault, but it was taken to be like reviewers suck at games, which it really wasn't. And I think it's very weird that whenever I see IGN in the news or I see Polygon in the news, it's because they gave either a really bad game a good score or a good game a bad score. And that's like, I guess it's all subjective in the end of the day, but it's very weird to me. I haven't heard much about IGN or any kind of journalistic site unless they've made some kind of error, which I think is a little bit unfair to them. But also, I think times just change.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to hear from a developer's point of view as well. Because like I said, we are just random people kind of speaking about it, and so it's like it's a lot different when your livelihood could depend on that review or that video. Like, obviously, it's not quite the same, but you know what I mean. Like, if you really want the game to get out there, it's got to be YouTube, especially in roguelikes, or it's got to be IGN or one of those things. So it's definitely interesting to hear about it from a developer's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the people like whether it's a content creator or a person at IGN, it's just a person doing their job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's like every person has their own opinions, they have their own preferences. Sometimes people get put on reviews for games that they don't even necessarily are big fans of, but you know, work has to get done.
Right.
And it just is how it is. I mean,
well, when you started making Revita, I guess developing it and putting it in early access, did you envision it becoming a game on the Switch or anywhere but Steam? Because I think a lot of developers turn towards Steam as their option for one of their first bigger games. Did you want to shoot for Revita to be a console experience?
I mean, I think the Switch wasn't a thing at that point, so I don't think
I guess it wouldn't have been, huh?
Yeah.
The Wii U gamepad, then. How about that one?
I mean, obviously, like that's kind of like the pipe dream, right? Like, like you grew up playing those console games and stuff, and then you're like, I know my game is Among Us. It's like, heck yeah.
There's gonna be a kid like you playing your game and getting inspired by it and things like that.
Like that's the dream. So yeah, it was never the plan to get as big as it did. I think the game originally, like the original scope for the game was like, oh yeah, maybe we'll hit like 200 relics at the end. Now we're close to double. So
it's almost ironic though, because the Switch feels like the perfect system for Revita almost.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
like it's kind of crazy for it to come out like when you're already developing it, and it's kind of like, oh man, it would be amazing to pick up that game, sit on the couch or go on a car ride, and then you can play through a couple of runs. I mean, the runs as well, I have to say, as someone who's been playing Isaac and does like hour-plus runs, it is refreshing to have a game where the runs are like 20 to 30 minutes max.
Yeah, they're a very tight experience.
It is so refreshing.
It is. Yeah, like it's nice. Like the game does have some min-maxing for those that like that, but it's not the backtracking. Remember to pick up this heart and get this much money and then bomb this. It's not that sort of backtracking experience and like min-maxing experience, which I really appreciate. It makes it so much more fun to just carry on playing and carry on playing and carry on playing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of min-maxing, but yeah, it's, as you said, it's like very different. It's like in the moment min-maxing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Like you have to kind of like plan. Okay, if I take this, then what does that mean for the future, etc. And with Revita specifically, like there's so many different paths you can kind of take to do basically the same thing. Like for example, in each area there's a statue at which you can spend HP to get an item. And the more HP you spend, usually the better the item you get. But you can also say, well, I kind of want to keep my HP though. And then you can skip that statue, which then makes a cursed chest appear at the end of the area.
I didn't know that.
Well,
I had no idea that was how it worked. Wow.
I always found the cursed chest and was just like, oh, that's a nice surprise.
No, so they're a trade-off. And there's like a lot of that kind of stuff where you really have to think, okay, like, is this worth it? Or would I rather like go like a different route further down the line, that kind of stuff.
That changes everything.
Sure. I know, right? I'm thinking now, like, no wonder I get so many curses when I don't buy items. That's crazy.
I love the curses. The curses are great. You've done a very good job at balancing them. That's another thing I just kind of want to talk about as well. I feel like I haven't noticed really any balance issues in the game so far. I know that you're rebalancing some things when it comes to 1.0, and I'm sure there's balance things I haven't seen yet, because I'm only 25 hours in at this point. But like, what's been, but what's been, that's a very low amount for me on a roguelike, very low. That's like, that's like casual level. So I'm sure when 1.0 launches, I'll get into the hundreds pretty quick. What's been your philosophy with balance? Has there been a game that you strive to sort of not copy, but like take the balance system from? Because I'm assuming it wasn't Isaac's.
No, so well, in a sense, I guess, but I wasn't aware of at the time. Basically, rather than have like one big pool of items, where just balancing is like thrown out of the window, items are kind of like distributed in different tiers. So you have like common, rare, legendary items. Yeah. And depending on that kind of affects how strong they end up being, and then that rarity also affects how frequent you're going to see those kind of relics.
Yeah, I think another thing on top of that as well that I noticed is the lower tier, the more downsides they tend to have.
Not necessarily, but there's a lot more stuff where it's like, there's a lot more situational stuff, right? Like for example, like there's a lot of the kind of like strong gun modifier, bullet modifier relics are common relics, because while they can be very strong, they can also ruin a bullet if you're unlucky, right? So
they're
that
also just the most interesting.
Goes into like the kind of like the equation of like where does an item go in the balancing.
And as well, sort of on top of that, in terms of balance, we were speaking a little bit earlier about how you could purchase items to bring them into a run with you, with this meta currency you get throughout the run. Is there? I know that like as you progress with that, things cost more and more. How exactly did you come up with like how much things cost there? Is that completely, because I know that it scales kind of in a strange way. So how exactly does that work? 'Cause I'm a little unclear on that.
It's actually fairly simple. Basically, the way the game kind of treats unlocks is that you can you cannot just get like unlocks from achievements and stuff like that, similar to Isaac, but you can also get unlocks from enemies, similar to Dead Cells. But obviously, I as the developer, like the order in which you get those items is obviously randomized because someone might get an item from this enemy first, someone else might get an item from this enemy first, etc., etc. So the way it basically works is that each time you pick up a new item key, so like a new unlock key, it increases the price by 0.5 and then rounds it. But then on top of that, depending on if it's a rare or legendary, it adds an additional multiplier on top.
That makes a lot of sense. Another thing on top of that, which is just, I'm diving deep here, but I've got a lot of questions and I thought you're here, so why not? When 1.0 comes out and these 70 plus new relics come out, what if you're already at the point where everything costs like 100? Are you just going to have to grind? Or is there going to be like a lot of ones that are already unlocked, or are they going to be cheaper? Like, how's that working?
So the short answer is yes. The more longer complex answer is that as you keep progressing in the game, it also gets more and more easier to actually accumulate more coins. Like, for example, the difficulty system in the game called Shards, which is like an ascension system. As you win a run, you climb to the next shard, etc., etc., which also then ties into the natural progression of the game. In 1.0, there might also be some more important stuff tied to it. But as you climb those shards, the amount of soul coins you get from each run also increases. You unlock like the fishing minigame, for example, where you can also get additional coins. At some point, you unlock new NPCs that then let you trade like meta currencies into each other, which then also allows you more freedom in how you kind of like spend your meta currency.
I like that. So one thing that is probably a pretty big question: would you suggest someone play a fresh save file on 1.0?
Yes, absolutely.
I was going to do that.
1.0 changes so much, even in the early game, in how the game's progression works, how the game's flow works, how like at what kind of speed you unlock new relics, new upgrades, that kind of stuff. That I very much recommend people starting from scratch.
Okay, that's really, really good to know. I might even pin that as a comment, just so people know that, because that's a really good bit of advice, because I'm definitely going to do that now. I wasn't sure if I was or not.
I'm not going to lose much progress by starting over.
Well, that's the thing, like, I'm thinking, because I was talking to Olexa about the game recently, who everyone probably knows is very well versed on Revita so far. He's been following the game for a while.
Was it Olexa?
Some like, I think he's on like 2K subs or something, 1K sub. I don't know.
It's the Fortnite YouTuber.
Yeah, he does Fortnite.
He's like an Orbital, that's right.
Yeah. Everyone loves that series.
Anyway,
so he's been following the game a while, so I was talking to him about it a bit, and I was like, oh, I've just unlocked all of this stuff, and I thought I basically unlocked everything I could get from the currency you get for killing bosses. And he was like, no.
The materials, yeah.
Yeah, materials. He was like, no, not even close. So I'm guessing 25 hours in, I'm still not even scratching the surface yet, so I'm happy to start over.
Yeah, 1.0 even goes as far as that it starts introducing new mechanics in the late game simply because there wasn't space to put them anywhere earlier.
Nice. So what would you say, like, what would you say on you might not even know this, to be honest, on an average person's experience with the game, how many hours in is the late game?
So the late game, I would say, probably is like shard 20 and above, which very much depends on the type of person playing.
Isn't Olexa, like, not even at shard 20 yet?
He was at shard 20.
Oh, okay.
And he put around, I think his save was like at 61 hours when he restarted it for the 1.0 build.
Okay, so Alexa's playing 1.0 already, I see.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So I'm like thinking about it in my head right now. I'm like, there's gonna be so much to do, huh? Like, I'm ready to set aside my entire day in a couple days just to hammer out Revita, because I've been waiting for 1.0 for a while, and I've been playing the early release. I think I'm about like 18, 20 hours in, but even still, I'm like, I feel like I haven't even touched a quarter of the content that's been available to me in the game. It's like I can't wrap my head around how much more there's going to be, and I'm so excited to like dive into it.
There's so much in there.
When did you know when to stop? Like, when was your point where you're like, I can't do anymore? I gotta save this for like Revita 2. Like, when was your point where you were like, I can't do it?
There wasn't really a point, otherwise we wouldn't be where we are.
That's true.
It's more so. I have like a rough scope that I want to meet, obviously. So like a certain amount of areas, etc. for each like kind of content update. I'm like, okay, this is like kind of like what the update is themed around. That's the stuff that I need to get in, and then with that come like items, etc. Because then if there's a new area, then every enemy in that new area needs a new item unlock attached to them. There's going to be new achievements tied to that, which then also need to have new unlocks.
Makes sense. So it just kind of
scales.
Yeah, snowballs. So one thing I was going to ask earlier that I'll come back to actually is you mentioned earlier that the original scope of the game was likely going to be only something around 200 relics or something like that. Now, when the scope increased beyond that, was the reasoning for that because you'd got that far and then gone, oh, actually, I have these new ideas, or was it there was a player base now and there was a popularity and you felt like you wanted to make more for the audience, or was it more that you wanted to make more for you?
It's more so that it was just a byproduct of the way the game kind of developed. Like as the areas get bigger and had more enemies, that kind of stuff, that automatically meant, okay, now we need to have more unlocks because we gotta stay consistent, and every enemy needs an unlock, otherwise it would be inconsistent, and that wouldn't be good. And then obviously there was also like more and more achievements, which are kind of like the Isaac style secrets. Well, like also started to come up with more and more ideas, and then each of them obviously need an unlock attached to them, and then it just kind of starts. It kind of just starts snowballing from there.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. So essentially, the game is just really massive because you wanted to add one more enemy, and it just snowballed from there.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
You're like, oh, I want to add this, and then you're like, oh no, now I've got to add this and this and this.
Here's 30 more secrets, yeah.
There are absolutely situations where I kind of like regret going with the whole kind of like Dead Cells unlock system as well, where every enemy needs to have an item unlock. Because like there are times where I'm like, there's so many. There's so many.
And I mean, it's great to hear though, because I mean, you sound like you had a great time developing the game,
yes.
and every part of it you just like fell in love with, and that's great because I mean, a good game comes from the developer being proud of what they're making, and it makes me more and more excited to play just from talking to you about it, because I can tell there's so much work and there's so much else behind it. And I don't know if you want to give like just a quick shout out to like the rest of the team on there who's worked on like the graphics and everything else, because it seems like every part of this game has been like almost meticulously crafted just to be an amazing experience.
You can tell it's a labor of love, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so we're like a team of 6 people working on this. So I'm the lead developer. I do pretty much all the design work. I do most of the programming at this point. We now have like a support team that also worked on the Switch port. They're doing a lot of optimization. They do help out at times with like bug fixes and stuff like that now. I also did like a huge chunk of the specifically the early art of the game, and then later on we got 2 more artists on board for one Chip, who is basically our lead artist. They do, for one, they made they made all the key artwork stuff. They do a lot of the kind of like the background ambient design stuff, and they also did some boss animations and that kind of stuff. And then we also have an additional animator who joined more recently with one of the later updates, who primarily works on enemy animations, boss animations, that kind of stuff. We also have a composer and sound designer, Christoph Jacob, who does a phenomenal job.
I will attest to that, yes.
So impressed by the final product with the soundtrack. Like some of the... Yes?
As I say, I had this really weird thing where, like, when I first started playing the game, I was really not sure what I thought of the music. I couldn't tell if I really liked it or it was just a bit whatever. But then, like, I found myself just bopping along to the music, especially on the first floor, and I'm like, actually, I love this music. This is so good. And now every time it's on, I'm just like humming along to it in my head. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, especially like some of the new 1.0 tracks are like insane. Like it's so incredible.
Well, people will be hearing the music because either pulling it from the game files or if Ben can send me it, I'm going to be having Revita's music playing in the background of this podcast just because it's great.
It's so good.
Ben's gonna copyright strike our entire podcast now.
But yeah, apart from that, we also have a writer, Pete, who basically did all the dialogue in the game, and who also helps me come up with all the scenarios and all the lore and that kind of stuff.
Very nice. I mean, I'm very kind of just astounded, I guess, as someone who's just is almost more leans towards like the casual gaming crowd. It's really crazy to see a 6-person team making a game that is this robust and this insane, and it
optimized.
Kind of,
Let's talk about that.
And optimized, by the way.
Holy hell! This game is like the most optimized thing we've ever seen.
If you've experienced any kind of crash in Isaac, you are going to love this game because it runs at 60 frames per second with every single relic turned on. That is absurd. Like, how did that even happen?
I don't know. I still don't know.
Well, I think it's just like your legacy code. The very base of what you did was just a very solid ground to build upon by the looks of it.
I would disagree with that.
From an outside perspective, that's what it looks like.
I mean,
yeah.
Just I think of like you pick up one synergy in Isaac, whether it be like Trisagion, like Ipecac, and it's just like, well, here's 20 frames the rest of your run. And I just watched a run by a turtle where he had a synergy where his bullets were constantly like fluctuating between being like, how would you describe that run?
Basically, this was in Revita. I played a run and I streamed it to these two while I was just messing around. And it was actually my first time beating Shard 4, because I'm on Shard 5 now. And I had the shotgun, and I got the moon earring that Ben mentioned earlier that makes your bullets orbit around you, which is already very strong with the shotgun, because it effectively increases the amount of time your bullets will be on screen. And then I got another item that makes your bullets pulsate. Normally, that kind of acts like... I forget the worm's name from Isaac, the worm trinket. That makes your shots pulsate.
It's called Pulse Worm, right?
Is it called Pulse Worm? Yeah. Normally it acts like Pulse Worm, where your bullets just grow in size and shrink in size as they travel. But when you have the Moon Earring, instead, they pull closer and further away from the player. It's kind of like a growing and shrinking aura of bullets. And then I got it with Piercing. And
then 4 times shots as well.
Yeah, and then I got it where you could fire 4 shots at once, and it was obscene. Like, there was bullets on screen at all times. There was essentially a bubble shield of bullets around me that literally annihilated everything in the game. It was one of the easiest wins of all time. But saying that was a very specific synergy. That I've not had a single run like that yet, but that one was special. But anyways, yeah, no lag at all. Perfect frame rate throughout. It was crazy. And yeah, it was just an absolute blast. That's another thing as well. I feel like a lot of roguelikes are a lot easier to break than Revita, which I think Revita's done a very good job of. Because everything costs HP, you can't just break the game.
Yeah, I also, to add onto that, I also specifically make sure that there's not a single way to duplicate a relic in the game. Because like that's like the guarantee that as soon as you add something like that to a game, you can break the game.
Yeah. It's definitely worked out.
Use a debug console for that then. I'm gonna ruin everything you've made.
The first video you do on it, you just use the debug console to break the game immediately.
I guess one big final point I want to talk to you about is you mentioned this on Twitter quite a while ago about the idea of like a debug console or like a console commands in roguelikes and video games in general, and your thought process on that. Did the debug console, if you can say, make it into the 1.0 release?
No. So the debug console also was never really meant to go into 1.0, if anything. So it's also, there's no guarantee that it will happen or will not happen. It is still something that needs to be discussed with the production team, if that's feasible, etc., etc. If it makes sense, if it fits the game, that kind of stuff. But if it were to happen, it was always planned to be like a post 1.0 thing, like once like all the spoilers out, that kind of stuff. So people don't
Right.
like.
You don't want data
Immediately.
mining, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think a really good sort of point to sort of, I know we're at about an hour here, so not to quite round things off, but kind of like a last point is, where do things look like they're going to go after 1.0?
The simple answer that may not be so simple. I don't know. It's just like I don't know. I have no clue.
But like, do you want to continue to make content, or do you just plan on supporting the game?
So I personally, if I had the possibility to do so, and there was nothing attached to it, I would absolutely love to do more with the game. I have like a design document with still way too many ideas. But the issue kind of is, and that's just the issue of game development in general, is like, now that the game is in 1.0, to continue working on it, it needs to be financially viable.
Of course, yeah.
To support me continuing to work on the project basically full time.
Mhm.
And that is a bar that the game needs to hit first. Now, is that a possibility? Yes. Especially with the reception we've received so far, especially with like very recently with how the game's been shaping up to. But at the end of the day, it's still like a lot of that kind of stuff like just comes down to who's gonna play your game, right? Like,
yeah, that's true, yeah. If it's not too forward of a question as well, how exactly did you handle working on Revita financially? Did you work another job for a while, or did you like go out and find funding or crowdfunding? How exactly did that go?
So originally Revita just started in high school, so I was living at home, and for context, I'm still living at my parents' home. But also, additionally, somewhere like 3 to 4 years ago, I started looking for a publisher. And so now I'm working together with Dear Villagers, who are very lovely to work with. And basically, they funded the development of the game, allowing me to basically work on it for full time.
Awesome.
That's incredible.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Like the job that I do like full time, we're like trying to launch a product right now. It's not a game or anything, but finding funding is just so tough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
it
can imagine
certainly
the struggles. So finding a developer to work with that's a really good one as well is just the dream come true, right?
Yeah.
And another thing as well, we kind of spoke about a little bit earlier about the rest of your team. How exactly what's the process of getting those on board? Are they people that you know, or are they found through the publisher, or is that up to you who you hire? How exactly does that work?
So most of them actually just happen through connections or just, friendships over the years, that kind of stuff. Like for context, like before I worked on Revita, I worked on a Paper Mario fan game. At which point I at some point needed music for the project, because I was like, well, what's a video game without music? And obviously you can't just use Nintendo's music. If you want to make a proper fan game, you need to be all original.
Yeah.
So I reached out to a composer back then who has done like a lot of like Mario and Luigi kind of remixes, like inspired remixes and compositions. And I was like, this is the person I want to work with. And so I reached out to them, and they were like, yeah, I'd be interested. And then over that, then we became friends, and now we're working together on Revita.
That's so cool, yeah.
And with a lot of the other people too, it's just via connections. It's like being mutuals on Twitter, for example. Some of them through the publishers' connections, that kind of stuff. So it's all like kind of like through connections, through knowing people, knowing other people, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That's kind of one of my favourite things about this whole world that we're sort of all in terms of gaming, is you just make so many cool connections. I mean, even just the fact that I'm sat here with another YouTuber, which I didn't know a few months ago, and a developer of a game that I'm currently playing, is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's the internet. It's a weird place.
It all connects back. I mean, like the artist I use for my channel is friends with somebody that I used to be friends with on Instagram back when I was like 12, and it just all came back in full circle. And it kind of is that same mentality where I didn't know who Turtle was until God, like summer? Did I meet you last summer?
I think the Nuzlocke was because someone from my channel commented on your post asking who you wanted to be part of the Nuzlocke, and you messaged me following that. Yeah, so it was
right,
the
and then now we have a podcast. We've done like Isaac runs and things like that. It's just, it really is great, and I think that without those kind of connections, I think things fail to start. Like if I wasn't talking to Turtle, or if I didn't, talk to Olexa and know of Revita through him or anything like that, this entire podcast would not be happening.
Right.
And it's just, it's incredible, really. The connections you make through that kind of stuff is really cool.
Yeah, it's like so wild. Like a lot of, like, for example, a lot of the people that I watched earlier, like in my childhood, are now people that I talk to regularly. It's super weird.
Yeah,
how
I'm in the
over
same boat
connections
there.
and stuff, you connect with people that you know over different means and that kind of stuff. It's insane.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same boat. Like I used to watch Olexa like every day, and now I'm speaking to him on a like one-to-one basis. It's just like, that's just weird. It's just kind of crazy.
Right? Yeah.
Especially with Kilburn too, like getting Kilburn in a call and being like, this guy made the game that I used to make money, and now I'm just talking to him in a call casually or getting him on for a tournament and stuff. I mean, knowing how much me and Turtle love doing community events, I am really excited for what the future could hold for Revita speedruns and Revita tournaments and things
I'm
like
really
that.
interested for speedrunning.
That's what I was talking about too.
Because it seems like it's quite limited, because obviously you have to complete the room to get to the next one, but the path that you take and the drops that you get, because like if you get a lot of keys, you can go through a bunch of rooms that essentially completely skip all combat.
Yes.
And it's going to be so interesting, and I'm sure like via some of the secret paths and stuff, there's ways to cut down your time, things like that. I'm really excited to see where that goes, because I quite like roguelike speedrunning when it's not Isaac style, where it's not just hold R until you get a good item in your first room. Yeah. So I'm excited for that, definitely.
Listen, as the world record holder for Isaac right now, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And everybody else hates it too, because no one's tried to run the game for like months. But you know what, Turtle, is you were dissing that shovel item earlier.
I was.
That would be one of the most...
It's the speedrun
exactly.
item. I found an item that reduces the amount of rooms per floor, and I was like, why would I want this? And now I know why.
Now you know. It works out fine. When you were making the game, did you think about the concept of like speedrunning Revita?
Not specifically speedrunning, but I did think of the concept of like kind of like mirror match kind of stuff, which is why the game got like a kind of like a seeded mode, and like daily and weekly kind of runs. Because I really like the when I was like really into Isaac, really into Isaac. I watched a lot of like content creators like do like mirror matches and stuff like that, which I thought was always like really fun. Like basically having like two gameplay videos next to each other and just seeing like what different choices people make. Yeah. And so with the way Revita is structured, like it just works really well for that kind of stuff, because like a choice you make now will have lasting consequences at the last area.
Yeah.
I guess more of a personal question I have about the game that just kind of interests me is I'm a big fan of just kind of like breaking down how things work, and one of my big things I did with Isaac was this thing called the 30 character run, where I tried to unlock everything like in one run pretty much. And I ended up talking to Kilburn about how seeds are formed in Isaac and how RNG is calculated, and he said he uses the Unix time system, and that every integer of time changes up the seed quite a lot. How does Revita do its seeding or its RNG values?
So for like daily and weekly runs, it also uses Unix time stuff, because it just needs to. So basically the runs reset for everyone at the same time, and everyone has the same seed. You need like some sort of constant value that you can base it on, which Unix time is, because it's going to be the same for everyone, no matter what.
Otherwise, you would have to like pre-author create the seed, which is just not good.
Yeah, exactly. And otherwise, I'll just put it that way. Making a roguelite like seeded is an absolute nightmare. There are so many variables that go into that stuff. It's wild, because like if you want to design a game that is good, you're gonna include cheats and stuff like that. Like stuff that the player will not notice, but will end up making the game less frustrating. So like, for example, in Revita, if you don't have any keys, you're more likely to find keys. If you are lacking health, the more health you're lacking, the more likely you are that you find health pickups, that kind of stuff. And you can't see that. There's no way to properly see that because you can't account for every single player action possibility.
Yeah, of course.
And that just turns that into an absolute nightmare. And then, like,
you're so fast eating it, yeah.
Yeah, and then additionally, on top of that, the way, like, kind of Revita generates its rooms is, like, it generates them one by one. Like, for example, Isaac, I'm pretty sure it just generates the entire area.
It does the whole floor.
And then that's very self-contained. In Revita, it's, like, floor by floor. And so depending on what paths you take, things might change up entirely for the same seat. And so, like, balancing that and making sure that all works was not fun.
That's development hell right there, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah. But no, it's interesting. I always like learning how that kind of thing is generated and how it works. Just one of those, like, I don't understand anything, but it's just cool to hear, like, how a game is generated or how those things come to be, because it's just, you go on a run, you could be like, I wonder if my chance of getting this item was increased by X or Y, but it could just be the seed. It's very
you never know,
intriguing to me. Yeah.
Like, I come from a coding background. Like, I did a university course on computer science for games development, so I've got like a good base understanding, but I don't actually code anymore because university was like making me hate coding.
No, that's fair.
So I went into like a world adjacent to coding, but it still means that I have like a sort of decent understanding. So it is definitely interesting to hear about how these things are done, because I didn't think it'd be quite that difficult. But then again, I suppose with seeding, if you don't have it in mind when you first make the game, it's like you really wish you did.
It's that kind of stuff. It's like the same, like if Revita ever should end up getting a modding scene, like a properly supported one, which once again, oh boy, does the game need to be financially viable for that to even be like a possibility.
So buy the game, everybody.
Yep, do it. But that's also going to be like one of those things where the game was not made with modding support in mind. So if that would end up happening, we would kind of like have to rewrite a lot of the game to support that kind of system. Which,
of course, yeah.
Oh boy, am I looking forward to that if that happens.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you really want to do, but also, please no.
I'll just remake Revita in Scratch. It's fine. I'll use my coding blocks. If color red, take damage.
Yes.
Easy.
No, it's just I really enjoy the passion you have about talking about the game and, of course, making it. And I really do hope it gets to the point where there is a robust modding scene and there is... I mean, not for your work, obviously, because it's going to be hell, but just because the community stay alive through modding and things like that. Yes. I mean, without modding, Isaac would have been dead in the water like 3 or 4 months ago, I feel like. So it's really cool to hear your perspective on that, I guess.
Definitely, and as well, you were saying it could be something that ends up being really difficult and depends on financial stability, stuff like that. Yeah. But at least the base game has a ridiculous amount of content just in case.
Yeah, modding is like definitely one of those things where it's like, if you have the financial viability and the community to back that kind of stuff, because you don't just need money, you also need a community that is actually willing to do modding. Because like a lot of times people are like, well, would this game get modding support? But then they wouldn't actually do the modding. They would just want to play mods.
Yeah. You need the people that want to make mods. It's kind of it reminds me a little bit of like Enter the Gungeon. Enter the Gungeon never received official modding support, so it's modding like the people that make mods. There's only really like 7 people that make mods for that game. They do a lot of work, and there's a lot of great mods out there, but it is a very, very tiny amount of people that are making mods for that game.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if you do have that, then that definitely keeps the game alive to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that would be really cool to see eventually is like the ability to make additional rooms for the game. That'd be super cool.
Well, the game doesn't really need that because, like, so the way the game works is like there are no rooms pre-saved in the game.
Oh, they generated on the fly.
They're all generated.
Okay, that doesn't matter. Ignore me then. I genuinely thought you had a set of rooms and eventually you'll have seen them all.
Nope.
But okay, that's impressive.
Infinite amount of rooms.
That's impressive.
I do want at some point maybe potentially tweak around some values in there because like I would like to have some more room design variation. Like at the moment it's like very much like okay, basically create a room with like different squares in it, right? Like so it has like a random like shape, but at the end of the day it still stays like some sort of rectangle, be it horizontal or vertical. And then it puts platforms in it and traps and that kind of stuff and enemies. But if I get the chance to, I would love to just do more, like just add more variation to that. Like for example, we have like one thing that we currently have is like mirror rooms. So like there's like a chance that a room just gets mirrored, which then creates like more visually interesting rooms and that kind of stuff. And I would like to do more with that if possible to like get some more interesting. Interesting room designs.
So each room feels a little more varied, sort of thing. Yeah. But that's really impressive. That I just thought I hadn't played enough to see all the rooms yet, and eventually I'd end up having seen them all. Because obviously Isaac has that problem in a massive way. Even with the amount of rooms in base Repentance, with the amount of hours I have, you just know every room as you walk into it. So it's really cool to see. And like, does that go for the enemies placed in each room as well? Like they're just completely random as long as they come from that floor. That's really impressive. That's gonna add a hell of a lot more replayability than I even thought was possible.
Yeah, honestly, like one of the kind of issues that you run into with like a pre-designed system, and I mean it makes sense. Like right, you get like more quote unquote high quality room designs at the end of the day because you have full control of them. But with like Isaac and Enter the Gungeon, you at some point run into this issue where the way these rooms are played becomes more of like a game of like memorizing patterns, right? Like
yeah, it very much does. Yeah.
Like you start like okay, you get this room, okay, this means I have to move in this way, rather than like you enter a room, you see enemies, and then you're like, okay, how do I deal with this encounter, right? That's kind of like that kind of gets removed at some point because you just start memorizing the different room patterns.
I feel like as well, one thing that really helps with that's kind of underrated is in Isaac, rooms are made to be easy, medium, or difficult, whereas for you, they can be easy, medium, or difficult, and it's just going to be random. Like, you're not going to walk into a room and know, oh no, this is a hard room. It's going to be like, oh, this room has spawned with these enemies. Oh damn, I'm in trouble.
Right.
Well, now you know, Turtle. The reason you lost that one run today is because the RNG was against you. It wasn't Ben's fault. It was just you're not lucky enough. That's why.
I had one run earlier when we were playing before starting the podcast where I just got ripped a new one by like 6 enemies, and it was just because there were a really, really difficult combination of enemies, and that's happened quite a few times now. And a few times I've been like, oh, what the hell, this room's really tough, and now that I know that that's just sometimes a random chance, that makes me feel a whole lot better about it.
I think with the idea of Isaac being a game where there are so many rooms, I don't think even adding new rooms fixes that issue. Just because, like, when I was streaming back when Afterbirth Plus was the most recent Isaac update, I was doing a blindfolded run with my friend, like, guiding me, like, just through him telling me what's going on in the room. And that friend had never played Isaac before. But even him just saying, there's, like, rocks right here, there's enemies right here, I knew exactly the room he was talking about. Out of, like, thousands of rooms in that game, I knew the precise room he was talking about every time because I have just played them so much. Once you play a room 2 or 3 times, it's in your brain forever. You can't unthink it. Yeah. So having these procedurally generated experiences where it's like you enter a new room and it could be similar and you understand the enemy patterns and the platforming going on, it still might be handled slightly differently than before, and it kind of makes the game, I guess, just feel it's better to replay it, which is kind of the goal of a roguelike.
Yeah, having that knowledge now and like thinking back on the time that I've played the game, that's actually like very true, and it makes a lot more sense now knowing that. Like, the rooms do change up how you play pretty drastically, especially in the late game when enemies have a lot of health, or if you have a lot of curse. It really... on the last floor, there's these little clay pots that, like, fire shots that follow you. Oh, they are so difficult. them enemies hit, and like I've had a few times where like 4 of those are spawned in one room, and I'm just like, my lord, what's going on? But
What Satanist designed this?
Yeah, exactly. It feels like just a really evil room, but it's actually just the fact that, oh, nope, you got unlucky, these are some hard rooms, and I think that's way better. I don't know why, but that just like lets you off the hook so much.
It's part of the gambling experience.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
It's the risk reward payoff.
To be fair, it's not fully randomized. So there's like with like the enemies, they're like certain quote unquote templates. Like not as in there's certain enemy layouts, but like basically like enemies are also like kind of like split into different categories. Like you have like heavy enemies, you have like medium enemies, you have like light enemies, and depending on that,
right,
different they can spawn to different amounts in different combinations, that kind of stuff. To like
I've seen like sometimes you'll get a room
really unfair.
Yeah, you'll get like a room that only spawns maggots sometimes or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, because if you put like 20 enemy spawns in a room and all of them were heavy, you'd be just screwed.
Yeah, absolutely.
The more you talk about the game, the more impressed I get that it actually like exists. It's the idea of a roguelike where pretty much everything, like not there's like no really preset rooms or things like that. Everything is almost entirely RNG, but it also is not like unfair. Like, you know, you have your safety zone around the door, like that can spawn on top of an enemy. It feels so polished. It feels so well done. It gets me more excited for 1.0 every single sentence you say.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think as well, like, the only constant in every run are the bosses, and that's it. Everything else is random.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
And that's like one of the, honestly, the bosses are like the big thing. That's like my kind of like one gripe with the game as it enters 1.0. I wish we had more boss variety, and that's also a thing that people bring up, because like a lot of the people that play Revita like used to Isaac, where you just have like a ton of boss variety.
Yeah, I was actually one of those people. When I first played the game, I was like, oh, is there only one boss? But then I've definitely gotten more used to it, and I don't care about the fact that there's only one boss now that I've sort of accepted it and realized it. But I do know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, and like the kind of issue with Revita is like the way we approach bosses was like, rather than go for like the quantity approach which Isaac has for the most part, not really the newer bosses. The newer bosses are way more complex, with like complex animations, with like different like movement patterns, that kind of stuff. But like for example, a lot of like the old Isaac bosses like Duke of Flies, Monstro, they're all like movement pattern plus attack, maybe sometimes 2 attacks, right? Like very, very simple, and that way you can produce a lot of different bosses. But with Revita, like each boss basically has like 5 to 7 different attacks. Then they have like a face switch attack, that kind of stuff, and that just makes it so it's basically impossible to just create a ton of bosses.
Yeah,
because each boss just takes 2 weeks.
Each boss is like making 4 bosses. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, it is something that I would like to tackle if it's financially viable.
I think the best way to tackle it from my point of view, if you ever do, is Isaac's style of champion bosses, where it's not a different boss, it's the same boss that plays differently. It uses slightly different attacks, or its attack patterns do slightly different things. And I feel like adding 3 or 4 varieties of each of the bosses with like a 25% chance of each of them. Obviously, once you get later in the game, you'd unlock the champions rather than being unlocked from the start. But that would also mean that you wouldn't have the problem of the bosses being the 5 stages of grief. Like, you wouldn't want alternate bosses, because then the names wouldn't make sense.
I mean, there are. So, in that sense,
too.
We technically do. So the way the game kind of works is that there's 5 areas, right, for like the 5 stages of grief. But then we also have like alternative areas for both area 2 and 4. Which also feature a version of anger and depression, but they're like very different boss fights. Okay. So that's kind of like one way we kind of get around the boss variety thing, where it's like, well, you know, some bosses can have varieties. Then there's also like the like rifts that you can find when you have like a lot of curses.
I love
those
rifts.
Yeah, that then turn like areas into like corrupted areas, which those bosses also get a little bit more tricky than the typical bosses, and that way we kind of like quote unquote cheat our way around having to create more custom bosses, even though that is something I would like to do. It's just like that there was absolutely no time to do that.
Yeah, I think the Curse Rifts are a really good way of doing it. I accidentally took a Curse Rift on the last floor on my first ever try of the last boss. I'd never fought him before. My first try, and I was like, whoa! But one thing that I felt like maybe you could do additionally with that is, I know the rifts aren't super, super rare, but maybe have it if you have enough curses, a boss just has the chance to be cursed, even if you're not in a Curse Rift.
So there are things, so there's, especially with 1.0, there's like a lot of like very small details like that kind of get added.
Okay.
So for one of the shard modifiers kind of does that. One of the I think it's actually just one of the custom ones. Like later on, as you progress through the game, there's like a very much Hades-like counterpart to the Ascension system, where you have the kind of like the linear preset handmade progression of the shards that the game just gives you, but then there's also the custom shards, which is basically like, hey, if you don't like the way the game progresses, like as I set it up, there's like a way that you can kind of like manually just set whatever modifiers you want.
You can make it as difficult as you want it to be, yeah.
Want to have enemies just deal like 2 times damage instead of like having an additional bullet in their attack? Sure, go ahead. Like that kind of stuff. And there's like this like a lot. there's like a lot of stuff like that.
Definitely looking forward to discovering that, yeah.
Yeah, and also like Cursed Rifts, like they have like a higher chance of spawning when you have more curses. That kind of like, it's just like a lot of like very like small details where it's like it's kind of like I guess like very Spelunky like in its secrets, where it's like, if you do this specific thing, then maybe something might happen. And I think that's also just going to be very fun to see people discover.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch other people and do it myself. Like I said, for those of you watching now, and you'll probably see it on my channel, I'm going to be starting a series on this game pretty much the day of the release, and hopefully playing quite a lot. I'm just because of the sheer amount of content, I think I'm also going to stream it as well, because otherwise it's going to take me a very long time to see everything.
Yes.
So there's going to be there's going to potentially be a lot of Revita for people, as long as people like it, and I'm sure people will, because I love it. There's going to be a lot of Revita on my channel, I think.
I'm the same way right now. It's going to be... I was thinking, like, 2 or 3 times a week in a company with Isaac, but it may end up just being, like, an everyday thing at this point with how much content there is. And I'm not mad about that at all. I mean, it's more fun game to play, more fun game to watch. You gotta enjoy it.
Isaac.
I mean, I'm not going to, like, mess with you. I think it has insane potential to potentially be, like, the next big roguelike, because, well, as it stands now, I mean... Isaac is still very thriving, but it's going downhill. I mean, the interest in the game has obviously declined since the final update is out. Yeah, it's natural. And people are kind of missing. And Inscription as well was a great game, but also very short. And with Casey's mod only finally just releasing a couple of weeks ago into its full release thing, it's great, but with there not being much different from the actual base game, it's not just going to have some very long-standing thing. Right. But Revita, with it just packed full of like meta progression and all of these different angles to play it and do things with it, I mean, I'm very, very excited, and I think it has potential to be the next big thing.
I definitely agree. I feel like it's the first game to come along in a little while that's really got as much to offer as this does, and I feel like, as I was saying earlier, it having one of the best risk-reward systems of any roguelike I've played means that a lot of like veteran roguelike players are going to find it very appealing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like specifically like if/when like kind of like the like very hardcore Isaac community starts getting wind of the game, I think they're probably going to be the community that's going to really dig the game.
Do you want that though? The Isaac community?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be against it if I can keep working on the game.
Obviously.
But if
just turn comments off, you'll be fine.
Just don't nerf anything or you will just hear hell constantly.
I mean, it's just like a thing where I feel like those are the type of players who really, really dig Revita, because it just has a lot of Isaac-like inspiration to it. Like the entire item system, like the way, the philosophy behind like the game is all about finding items and then combining items to create like these crazy like visually interesting builds. That's like there's surprisingly not a lot of roguelites out there that follow that kind of trend, which is
there really isn't.
Very
There
shocking.
really isn't. And as I was saying earlier, that run I had with a shotgun, that was a very visually interesting one.
Yes.
And like that's one I've had some other runs that were similar to that, but like I've only really had like 2 or 3 runs like that so far. But I imagine there's literally thousands and thousands of them that you can see. And as you said, that's what you strive for. And they seem, at least so far, like rare enough apart that they're still really exciting. It's not like every single run throws 1,000 things in your face. I feel like Isaac has kind of gotten to that point now where all the runs seem a bit too far-fetched.
Yeah.
Whereas, so far it's been a very good balance of that, and you kind of strive and seek out those weird, crazy visual builds.
Well, the big thing that I think Isaac and Revita have in common, though, is how sad I feel when I have no key on a floor. I get just openly depressed. I'm like, no.
Revita does do a good job of giving you no keys when you need key.
However,
it gets changed, right?
There's also systems there that kind of like they're hidden, but like for example, if you enter a shop with no keys, you're guaranteed to have a key that you can buy. Like, there's a lot of like very small things that once you like start like memorizing like how the game plays and stuff like that, you get into the loop of like, okay, now I can kind of like strategize around the keys because I know where I can get guaranteed keys and stuff like that.
Yeah, take note, Kilburn. Give me more keys. But I think that's about all that I have to ask you, unless Turtle has some more things he wants to throw at you and badger you for more answers.
I feel like I could talk for quite a while, but considering we've already been going an hour and a half, I think it's best we we kind of end off here. And I don't know, do you want to just end off by giving people another little peek into what 1.0 has to offer and a little advertisement for the game?
Sure. So, if you like roguelike games, if you happen to specifically really like Isaac, or in general like games in their nature, like Neon Abyss, Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, where the game is like kind of like centered around the idea of like creating like crazy builds, like making interesting choices, that kind of stuff, then you're probably really gonna like Revita, and it's gonna come out of early access on the 21st of April on Switch and PC. And on PC it's on Steam, GOG, and Epic. And so, yeah, if you're into that stuff, the 1.0 update basically just increases the content by tenfold. It's insane. I need to get some sleep at some point, probably, maybe. If you're into that, then yeah, absolutely. We'd be glad to have you as part of the community.
There'll be links down to everything down below as well, to Ben's Twitter, all the game stores with it on there, all of that, so no need to go searching on your own for it.
And remember, it's on sale right now. Go get it. And
yes.
for whoever lucky person I end up buying it for, enjoy.
It's less than $1 an hour for your time, because you are going to pay $15 to play for like hundreds and hundreds of hours this game to even encounter the end of the game. So it's well worth your money. It's well worth it to help Ben make modding a thing eventually.
I gotta say, if you want to see this game
years.
continue further into the future, then you have to buy it.
Yeah. But I appreciate you coming on. It was a blast talking to you.
It's been a blast.
I'm really excited to see where the game goes, and we'll obviously all be in touch because I am just super excited for 1.0. But yeah, as always,
we'll have to jump on and get you on a mirror match as well.
Heck yeah, absolutely. I'd be absolutely up for that.
That'll be very fun.
If we do our Revita tournament, we're gonna have you on there. You're gonna just embarrass Olexa half to death. And it'll be
no, you're gonna see how terrible I am at my own game. That's what's actually gonna happen.
Well, you know what? You'll beat me. That's all that matters. But
we'll see about that.
Coming on. Everything's down below. Links to everybody. Me, Turtle, Ben, all the games, everything like that. A like and a comment, as always, helps out small channels like us. But any parting words from either of you to go?
Yeah, just as we've been reiterating, please go play the game. It's a very good game. And also check out the videos on my channel of the game and on Video One Piece as well. We'll be playing it a lot. So if you wanna check it out before you buy it, then please, there'll be gameplay in the background of this video anyways. But yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, do it.
Well, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks for our next episode, but it's been a joy. Peace out.
Later, guys.
Bye.